One week, I was enjoying the cult classic Forbidden World, and the next, Roger Corman passes away. As a filmmaker, he gave audiences a mix of the best and worst B-horror and sci-fi movies to grace the silver screen. Corman helped turn out such low-budget classics as Little Shop of Horrors, The Pit and the Pendulum, and Death Race 2000. Additionally, he gave many big-named actors and directors their first break, including Jack Nicholson, Diane Ladd, James Horner, Martin Scorsese, Jonathan Demme, Ron Howard, and Francis Ford Coppola, just to name a few. Throughout his career, Roger Corman wrote, produced, and directed some of the most influential films ever made, although you might not know it. It might sound like an overstatement, but his films and the people who he worked with contributed to many of the greatest films in American cinema. Roger William Corman was born April 5, 1926, in Detroit, Michigan. His parents, William and Ann, moved the family to Los Angeles, where Roger and his brother Gene, who would also become a film producer, went to Beverly Hills High School. After high school, he attended Stanford University, intending to follow the same career path as his father, earning an engineering degree. Before completing school, he joined the U.S. Navy from 1944 to 46. After his stint in the Navy, he returned to Stanford, completed his degree, then worked as an engineer for less than a week, realizing it wasn't a career for him. He always had a passion for movies, as one probably would growing up in Hollywood. He took on various odd jobs until he landed a position at 20th Century Fox as a messenger in the mailroom, eventually working his way up to story reader. One screenplay that he suggested and provided feedback on was eventually developed into the Western film The Gunfighter, starring Gregory Peck. When his contributions went uncredited in the film, he left 20th Century Fox. After leaving Fox, Corman studied English literature for a term at Oxford University using the GI Bill. He then returned to Hollywood and got a job for a literary agency and wrote the script for Highway Dragnet, which he sold to Allied Artists. Part of his deal in the sale was that they gave him an associate producer credit in the film. The producer credit opened some doors for him that helped while getting his first film made. He used his contacts and personal money to raise the budget to produce Monsters from the Ocean Floor. Roger Corman is known for his short production schedules, low budgets, and reusing as many sets, locations, and props as possible. This all started with his first film, Monster from the Ocean Floor. Corman read a story in the newspaper about a company that had invented a miniature submarine. He then called the company and told them he was an independent filmmaker and would be interested in using their submarine in his film. The movie cost between $12,000 to $28,000 to make, depending on your source. He followed up Monster from the Ocean Floor with The Fast and the Furious, before sitting in the director's chair with Five Guns West, a Western made in under 2 weeks. Throughout the 1950s, Corman collaborated with the American Releasing Company, which later became American International Pictures, producing a string of low-budget Western, action, horror, and science fiction movies, such as Gunslinger, Carnival Rock, and Attack of the Crab Monsters. Corman would often start with a title for his films and then write the script. The films were produced on small budgets, which Corman would attempt to reduce further by cutting corners wherever he could. Corman's directors were given small budgets and frequently expected to finish filming in as little as 5 to 10 days. In 1960, Corman directed and produced the cult classic The Little Shop of Horrors. The film was shot in just 2 days and featured a memorable role by the then unknown Jack Nicholson. The film came about when he spotted a set built for another movie lying vacant. He said, "If you leave it up, I can have a script written in a couple of weeks, and I can go in there and shoot in a couple of days." They said yes, and that's what he did. He hired actors for a week, rehearsed Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then shot the picture on Thursday and Friday. The movie inspired a stage musical and a 1986 musical adaptation starring Rick Moranis. Jack Nicholson would appear in multiple Corman films. Later, he would star in another low-budget Corman film called The Terror, along with Boris Karloff. When filming began, the movie didn't have a script. Corman had access to the Raven set and opted to make use of it outside of filming The Raven. The movie's storyline is minimal, and it was directed by multiple directors. such as Corman himself, Francis Ford Coppola, and Jack Nicholson, depending on who was available that day. In 1966, Corman made The Wild Angels, a biker movie with Peter Fonda and Nancy Sinatra. It cost $360,000 to make and grossed more than $25 million. The movie featured many actual Hells Angels and got him sued by the biker gang, upset about the way he portrayed them. Most of what is featured in the film was told to him as experiences by the bikers. It was then followed up by The Trip, a story about LSD written by Jack Nicholson and starring Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper. Peter Fonda would go on to make Easy Rider, also co-starring Nicholson and Hopper. Corman's pictures were open for their time about sex and drugs. In preparing for The Trip, Corman dropped acid so that he could accurately portray the experience. He said, "I had a wonderful trip. Everything was spectacular about it. I knew Jack, who was writing the script, had taken LSD. I knew Peter Fonda, playing the lead, had taken LSD. And Dennis Hopper, the co-star, had taken LSD. So I thought, as a conscientious director, I had really better do this myself." He was offered bigger budgets and larger films. However, those offers came with terms such as which actor to cast or script approval. Corman preferred to be in control of his films, so he would turn down the larger offers for that reason. This was an advantage of his films. Because of their low budgets, it was easier for him to make a profit from the movie. Other Corman alum are Robert De Niro, who got his first Hollywood film role in Bloody Mama, Pam Grier in The Big Dollhouse, and Rocky himself, Sylvester Stallone, who was in Death Race 2000. The film cost around $300,000 and starred David Carradine. Are you a fan of the Fast and Furious movies? If so, you can thank Corman for the name. Corman produced a movie called The Fast and the Furious in 1955. Later, producer Neil Moritz discovered the film when he was launching a car-fueled franchise of his own, starring Vin Diesel and Paul Walker. The film is not a remake or reboot. Primarily, Moritz wanted the name, so they came to an agreement under which Moritz swapped stock footage for the naming rights to the 2001 film and its successors. In my humble opinion, it was in the 1980s when he made some of his best B-movies, including Battle Beyond the Stars, Galaxy of Terror, The Slumber Party Massacre and Slumber Party Massacre 2, and Forbidden World, to name just a few. He also acted occasionally, having cameos in films of some of the directors he mentored in the past, such as Swing Shift, The Silence of the Lambs, and Apollo 13. In 1960, Corman began working on a series of films based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. The horror series started with The Fall of the House of Usher. He had a rather large budget and shooting schedule compared to his typical films, working with a $200,000 budget and a 15-day schedule. This spawned additional Poe films including The Raven, The Pit and the Pendulum, and The Mask of Red Death. The films featured horror movie legends such as Boris Karloff, Vincent Price, and Peter Lorre. These films solidified his reputation as a master of horror and are recognized for offering decadent gothic chills while delving into themes of faith and supernatural. The film The Fall of the House of Usher was chosen for the National Film Registry in 2006. In 1970, he left AIP, taking a break from directing, and formed New World Pictures along with his brother Gene, a distribution company. He said, "I made too many films too fast, and I was working almost constantly." New World became a successful distributor of independent films, releasing classics such as Fantastic Planet and The Arena. New World Pictures expanded their operations to include distributing foreign films, including films by people such as Ingmar Bergman. Foreign films turned out to be 1/5 of New World's $55 million annual revenue by 1980. Then in 1983, he sold New World for $16.5 million. He formed a new company a couple of years later called Concord. There, he continued to crank out B-movies, including an adaptation of The Fantastic Four. Constantine, who owned the rights to Fantastic Four, didn't want to lose them, so they hired Corman to crank out a micro-budget film. The actors, not realizing the intent of the movie, put on the best performances they could, and honestly, I would argue it is better than some of the larger, big-budget versions that have been made. The movie was later bought and shelved by Marvel. However, you can find pirated copies pretty easily. His final directing credit was in 1990 with Frankenstein Unbound, an adaptation of the Brian Aldiss novel that offered a futuristic take on the Mary Shelley story. The film received some decent reviews, however, few people watched the movie. In 1962, he made The Intruder. The movie is about racial integration in the South at that time. William Shatner, a stage actor with only a few credits to his name, starred in the movie. The Intruder is about an agitator, played by Shatner, who comes to a small town and spurs racial unrest amongst the white townspeople to acts of violence against the local blacks that culminate in a church bombing and a near lynching. The film was made on location in Missouri. Nowadays, that wouldn't be an issue, but remember, this was the Deep South in the 60s, when they were making a film about racism. Many locals were cast in roles in the film, including Charles Brown, a local black man at the local school that had just been integrated that year. The script he gave to some of the locals was different than the one on the film. This way, he was able to water down the message so as to not stir up the populace with the full anti-racist message in the movie. However, even with the watered-down script that they saw, he was met with threats of violence and murder threats from some of the local population. Corman took great pleasure in making the film, and it received positive reviews. Unfortunately, the film was a financial failure. Corman would famously claim that it was the only film that he directed that didn't make any money. One reason is some of the racial language used in the film caused it to be denied the production code seal, which was in place at the time, and needed to show the film in most theaters. However, thanks to DVD and home video, as well as international showings, the film has now made a profit. Targets, which was made in 1968, wasn't meant to be a film with a message. At the time, it came about because Corman wanted to reuse some footage from the Terror. So, they made a film that had Boris Karloff hosting a film at a drive-in theater where a young man goes on a shooting spree, something very relevant to today. In 1990, Corman published the book How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime. The book is a mix of humorous anecdotes about his life and a bit of insight into his filmmaking, and for any Roger Corman fan, a must-read. Roger Corman has received numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards, a Grammy, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 1998, he received the first Producer's Award ever presented by the Cannes Film Festival. Corman received an honorary Oscar in 2009. In 2006, he received the David O. Selznick Award from the Producers Guild of America, and honestly, I could go on for some time as to many of his accomplishments, but I won't. Roger Corman's impact on the film industry is immeasurable. With his ability to spot and nurture talent, his legacy lives on through the countless filmmakers and actors he mentored. His innovative approaches to low-budget filmmaking have influenced generations of filmmakers, and his career is a testament to creativity, efficiency, and a deep love for the art of filmmaking. His contributions to the industry have left an indelible mark, making him a true legend in the world of cinema. Corman died May 9th, 2024, at the age of 98. At his home in Santa Monica, California, surrounded by his family.